Hey guys, Kyle here. Welcome to the Monday Mastermind. I am so excited to see you guys today. I'm actually here. I've got my office finally figured out. I got it all painted. I've got the setup with my lighting all the way that I like it. So it's taken a few weeks, but finally, it is good to go. So hopefully you guys can hear me loud and clear. You can see me, and that it's streaming just fine here to both YouTube and Facebook. And anyways, I had a great weekend. Just lots of stuff working with my family, going on with my family here at the house. You know, we were doing a lot of projects around the house, a lot of kids stuff, and luckily Saturday I actually had some good real estate stuff. I was out showing some properties. I was meeting with an agent, and just a really good weekend. I hope you guys had a good weekend too. But now we are at Monday, the start of the week, and we absolutely just need to crush it this week. I know I've got already quite a bit of things lined up, and so it should be a good one. But today, to kick off your week, I actually had a great question over the weekend from a friend of mine, Melanie, and I couldn't believe that I hadn't done a video on this already. And so the question was, do you have anything about CMAs and how you do your CMA? And if you ask that question to 100 agents, I'm sure you'd probably get 100 different answers on how people do their own CMAs. But I wanted to share with you guys how I do my CMA, and just kind of how I go about my process, how I think about CMAs, and all of that good stuff. So that's what I'm going to be covering with you today, and hopefully get this all done in the next 30 to 45 minutes for you. But anyways, let's start with, if maybe you're a brand new agent, you're like, what is a CMA? What does it stand for? Well, a CMA is a competitive market analysis, and it's basically taking properties, similar properties that have sold, and trying to determine a valuation on a property that hasn't been sold yet, right? Like maybe it's a home that is for a buyer, if you're out showing properties and they want to make an offer on it. Well, they want to know, is this a fair value? Is this, above the asking, or, is it above market, below market? They want to kind of know that. If you got a listing appointment, right? Of course, the seller wants to know, like, what's the value of my property? What should we list at? What's it going to sell for? And so a CMA is something that if you're not already familiar with it, you're going to get very familiar with it over the course of being a real estate agent. And it's just one of those things that I actually have a passion for. I really love doing CMAs. It's almost like you get to be a detective and really go find all of the information that you possibly can on a property, and then share that information with your client. And so hopefully, at least if it's a listing, you come to the same page or same terms with that client. That might be a whole different story on if y'all's perception of what the property's worth is different. But that's why, again, knowing how to do a CMA and letting the data back you up, I think that's the most helpful thing you can have in any kind of a listing presentation. And even when you go and you represent a buyer and you're trying to get them confident on their offer, it's super important as well. And so that's one of the first things that I want to share, is just one of those questions that you get asked all the time as a real estate agent when you're out showing properties. And it's, a buyer client says, hey, is this, a fair value? What would you offer for this property while you're out showing them? And I always tell them pretty quickly, hey, I tell you what, it's a great question. I, can't possibly know the right value on every property out while we're showing. There's just no way to know every neighborhood, every home that gets sold. So I always share with them, I say, hey, tell you what I'm going to do is, when I get back to my office, I'm actually going to do what's called a CMA, and I'm going to share all of the facts and the data about that property with you, so we can make a super informed decision, versus me just shooting off the hip and telling you, oh, this is, seems right, or, oh, I think it's overpriced or underpriced. Like, that wouldn't be fair to that client. And so most of the time what I share is, hey, what we're out here to do today is determine which of these properties most reflect the type of home that you could see yourself living in. And then once we've narrowed that down to one or two properties that we want to potentially make an offer in, I'm going to go do a deep dive and get you the actual data on that property. And so that's how I handle that question. I think that clients will respect that, because they know, hey, this guy's not just, blowing smoke. Like, this is actually, he's going to go get the facts for me. So, and most of the time you just have to do that one time. And then if you've got multiple tours set up, weeks or whatever later, they kind of get the hint, like, hey, I'm not going to get the exact number on this property tour. I will, if I like the property, get the value at that point. So that's one of the first things there. Now, some other questions that real estate agents typically have about CMAs, the ones that I typically hear most often is, how do you calculate a CMA? And really, that's what I'm going to cover with you today. I'm actually going to share my screen and give you some examples of doing CMAs live on the spot from some properties that are just recently listed, and let you know how I go about figuring that out. But realistically, now with technology and everything, I use a lot of different tools. I use, other sources, third-party sources to back up data to give me some information to start with. And then really, of course, using the MLS is usually going to be the most widely used, the best source for actually getting that CMA done. So what should be included in a CMA? These are just the things that I use. I use the Zillow Zestimate, and I know a lot of you guys are cringing right now when you hear that, thinking, why would that be the first thing that he says he uses, if at all? And it's funny that to answer that question, it's because there's a perception around Zestimate, and you need to know going in that, whether you have a seller or somebody that's, looking to buy a home, they've probably seen that property's Zestimate online. So regardless, you need to at least be aware of what it's saying that the value is. That way you can at least, either encourage that is kind of accurate, or you can kind of discredit it and say, look, that's not accurate and this is why. And so, but having the awareness around it is obviously, I think, an important thing, and it's where I start with it. I go out, I get the data. I know that here in Texas, we're a non-disclosure state. And so Zillow's Zestimate, it even says on their own website, is only 1 star as far as accuracy out of 5 stars. And so if I've got to have that discussion with the seller, I can have it. I can explain all of that to them. But again, I still need to know what the average person out there just looking at this property is going to see, because most of them are going to go to Zillow and they're going to see the Zestimate. And so you want to be aware of it. The other one is I use RPR, which stands for the Realtor's Property Resource, and it's a free tool. I believe if you just are a actual member of the Realtor Association, they'll send you your NRDS number, and you can use that to log in to RPR, absolutely free, no cost, which is an amazing tool. You can use that to look up properties, not even just in your MLS. You can even use it in property, in different states and different MLSs. So that's really a really cool tool to have at your disposal. I rely on that pretty heavily, and I'll share how I use it. As far as the value, though, I use that almost like a Zestimate, because I've been in RPR and found the values to be completely different than what they truly are, but I still look and see what RPR says the value is. Next, I go over to the tax records, for my county tax records, and I see, what is the tax records telling, that this property is being taxed at. Now, obviously, that's something completely different than what the market value is also. And every market's, I'm sure, a little bit different. What I've noticed in my, county, in Bexar County here in San Antonio, is that it's usually about 90% of what ends up being the market value. Now, again, that's a huge general rule of thumb. That's not by any means the end all be all. There's vastly different numbers there sometimes, but in general, just, to get that point across, don't think that the tax value is what the property is worth. Most of the time, it's actually worth more than that. Not always, but most of the time, I would say that I've found that to be true. And usually it's, maybe anywhere from 10 to 5% higher than the tax value. Again, not always true, but it's just a good general gauge to kind of get things started, right? So then, now that you've got all that stuff lined up, that is when now I jump into the MLS and I start to look at what homes have sold for that are similar to my subject property. Right? This is where that's kind of the end all be all of it, right? Like those first 3 are just kind of, get you started. This fourth one is really, there's no better way to determine the value of a property than through the actual sold comps of recently sold properties. And so again, that's where you jump into fourth, at least for me, and really start going from there. So I'm going to give you a couple general rules of thumb too before I go into all of this, because as far as the examples go. And these general rule of thumbs, they're just what I used. I've found, to help me determine the most similar properties over time. And so my first one is that, you want to look for properties that are plus or minus 10% of the square footage of the property that you're looking at, right? So if it's 2,000 square feet, I'm looking at 1,800 to 2,200 square feet for that property. If it's 3,000, I'm looking at 27 to 3,300. Next is years age of the property. So if it's, I look to try and be within plus or minus 5 years of the age of that property. So if it was built in, 1995, I'm looking at 1990 to 2000. If it's built in 2017, I'm going 2012 to the present, right? That's just how I do that. Next is the same neighborhood. So I try and get the properties that are in the exact same neighborhood as one another. And if I can't, like if it's a small neighborhood or there's just not a whole lot of homes that come up for sale in there and that have been sold, then I will extend it, right? I'll go out maybe a half mile, maybe a full mile if I need to. But then if you do that, just realize that all of the other filters become that much more important, that you have them be spot on. So anyways, age of the property, neighborhood. Then I make sure that they're all the same style of home. Is it single family residential? Is it a duplex? Is it a condo? Is it a townhome, right? Compare to the similar properties. Same bedrooms and bathrooms. So is it a 3-2? Is it a 4-2? Is it a 5-2.5? 3.5, whatever, right? Like I just look at that. The one thing I may fudge on, and I kind of talk about this a little bit later that you can manipulate, is half bathrooms, right? Like, if it's a 3-2.5 or a 4-2.5, if it's a 4-2, that's usually kind of close. You might just add in a little bit extra value for that half bathroom. But I won't, discount properties or not even have them show up just because it doesn't have the exact same amount of half bathrooms. Garage spaces. So, is it a 3-car? Is it a 2-car? Stories. Is it a 1-story? Is it a 2-story? Is it a 1-story with a bonus room, which I would classify as a 1-story? And typically I'll lump those two together. I'll put a 1 and a 1.5 as together. I'll put 2 stories together. And I kind of look at it like that. Is it master bedroom up versus master bedroom down? If I've got enough data, if there's a lot of comps coming up in my filters, then I'll put that comp in there just to make sure that it's as close to the subject property as possible. And when I say enough comps, I think this is an important thing to realize too, is I look for anywhere between 5 to 10 sold comps to be able to determine, if I've got enough comps or not. If I've got 20, right, that means my filters aren't tight enough. I don't have enough of them, and it's showing too many properties for me. If I've got only like 1 to 3 properties that have sold, then my filters are too tight. I need to maybe widen it a little bit. And I'll talk a little bit about what I start as far as widening it, where I would go from that first here next. But before I get into that, what else are some general rules of thumb? Pool versus no pool, right? New construction versus pre-owned. You want to separate those out. Of course, I already said using 6 months of data. And then acreage homes, right? If the home is on a half-acre lot, I usually go 0.4 to 0.6 as far as acreage. Give it a little bit of a radius, but at least I know I'm going to get half acre similar properties. If it's a full acre, I'll go like 0.8 to 1.2 acres. If it's more than that, like say it's 3 acres, I'll go say 2 to 5 acres, just so I can kind of get something similar as far as the land goes. If it's just your average neighborhood lot, like it's 0.15 acres or 0.2 acres, I just leave that kind of be. I don't really mess with that or manipulate it too much. Now, if I do need to manipulate things, like say I'm not getting enough comps, like I'm only getting 1 comp, that's not enough to really determine if that subject property is similar to enough properties. Then what I'll do is I'll widen the square footage range. Typically, I'll do that first. So maybe instead of, if it's a 2,000 square foot home being 18 to 22, I'll go 16 to 2,400. Right? I'll start widening that a little bit wider. I'll widen the age of the property. So instead of it being, 2000 to 2010, I might just go, 1990 to, present, right? I'll widen that a little bit. I'll go outside of the 6-month range. So I'll go 12 months or maybe even 24 months if I need to. If it's a very unique property, not a whole lot of similar homes in that neighborhood, then I'll widen that. But then I just, internally know if it sold 12 months ago, or especially if it sold 24 months ago, what has my market done in 12 months or 24 months? Has my market increased? If so, then I need to factor that in when I'm looking at that comp of what it sold for a year ago, right? So if it sold for $250 a year ago, then I'll say, well, probably that property is closer to $260 today, right? Or just whatever it is. If I know, the values have gone up 4% in my market in a year, then that's kind of what I'm using. And you can back that up with data when you're sharing this information with your client. So again, those are kind of some of the things that I'll manipulate. One of the last ones is I'll go outside of the neighborhood again. I might have mentioned this, up to about a half a mile to maybe even a mile radius, just depending on the property. Or if it's out in like the country and they're not really just even neighborhoods out there, I might even go 5 or 10 miles as far as a radius goes. But again, I want all the other filters to get tighter as far as, what's the land on it. Is it 3 acres? Okay, I want to make sure I'm finding, 2 to 5 acre properties if I'm widening the radius to 10 miles, because you can definitely find some different properties. You'll probably pull in some neighborhoods, you'll pull in all sorts of different things when you're going that wide of a radius. So just make sure, again, everything else is kind of tight on it. Now, my next question I get asked quite a bit too is like, what do you bring to your listing presentations? Do you, print all this stuff out and bring it with you? What is your process? And for that, what I typically say, and this is 90% of the time, what I do is I get all of this data up front, right? Well, first off, let me take a step back. What I do is I actually get very clear with the seller about their property, right? Like before I go out and do a listing presentation, I ask them a lot of questions about that property, so I can get as much information ahead of time so I can do an accurate CMA before I even go out to the property. It's not the end all be all. There's a lot of times that sellers leave things out or they forget things, or you get to the property and it's not exactly the way they said it. But in general, I like to know, like, hey, what kind of maintenance have they done on the property? Is the HVAC, the roof, the water heater, like, have they kept up with that stuff? Is the property been remodeled? Have they done any updates since they've moved into it? Because if not, a lot of times, you can go back to the, when the house was most recently purchased by them and look at photos and kind of see like what the house looked like. Or have they remodeled it? Did they change floors? Have they recently painted? Have they put granite in? How is the landscaping? And I asked them this question very specifically. Hey, is the grass like, a golf course? Is it, completely dirt, or is it somewhere in between? Right? Are plants dead, or are they all alive? Are trees trimmed? Like, what does the appearance of the house look like? And so you ask them that. And from that, those are as much, details as I try and get. Like, have they put on a deck? Have they, I try and get as many details as I can, and from just on the phone. And then what I do when I've done my CMA, now I've, already come up with all the data, is then I email them a preliminary CMA even before I go out there for my listing appointment. And what that looks like is I send them the Zillow Zestimate, I send them the tax report, I send them RPR, I send them my comps from the MLS. I send all of that stuff up front, and I put a little synopsis in the email of, hey, here's what I've found so far. I'm looking forward to our discussion, in a day or whenever it's going to be. And then I'll usually text them or email them, text them or call them and let them know, hey, I just sent you an email. Take a look at it, just so you can kind of be on the same page when I get there. You'll probably have questions. Don't worry. You don't have to call me back and, ask questions. We're going to go over it all when I get there, but I just want you to have a look at it before I get to the property, so you're not just seeing it for the first time when I'm there. And so that's typically what I do. And then I send all that stuff up front, all the research that I've done, send it over to them. And then when I'm actually out at the property, I can focus on just having a discussion with them, right? The only thing I typically bring to that listing appointment is right here. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. My iPad. That is all that I bring to my listing appointment. And that's, I don't bring anything printed out, because again, that's too static for me. I like to be able to manipulate and kind of go on the fly when I'm at the property. Because again, if I'm seeing things that are, benefits that maybe I didn't think about when I created the CMA, maybe it just has an amazing view or just something that's unique, and I didn't really factor that in when I was thinking of pricing. Well, now I can, just again, have a discussion. I can share things on my iPad, as I'm going, versus having a piece of paper that, was printed out, before before I even ever saw the property. And so my iPad, it is an LTE iPad, and so that way I don't have to connect to their Wi-Fi. I'm always connected on there, which has been a huge help. And so when I just show up to the property, I typically have all that stuff that I sent over in an email already pulled up in different tabs on my iPad. Got the MLS up, I've got Zillow, I've got tax values, I've got everything, RPR, it's all on there. So that way, whenever I'm going through, I can, go through all of the different details that I sent in the email and share them with them, but go in more detail. So a lot of times, like the comps, I would have just sent over the actual printout of the comp sheet from the MLS. But now that I've got my iPad and I'm sitting there with them, now I can click on the actual properties and show pictures of what those properties looked like and say, look, this is what your house looks like. This is what their house looks like. It gets pretty easy at that point when they can compare. But the other benefit that I like being able to have this all be live and kind of going as I'm talking with them is I can also say like, hey, take a look at this one that sold. See how this one looked, like see how it was staged, see how they didn't have any clutter, they didn't have any of this and that, they had recently painted this. So this is the quality you want to have your property in if you want to get this type of price. And you can have those discussions with them at that listing appointment. And so some people, I'm sure, have a million different ways of doing it. A lot of times people want to bring things to give to the seller. For me, I've just found it better to, send the email up front, focus the listing appointment as a discussion. Sometimes we'll even just sit in the dining room, we'll sit in the living room, wherever I can kind of get near them and show them the iPad. And that's typically how I handle my listing presentation. That's kind of a whole nother video. But anyways, then the last thing as a follow-up to that is after my listing appointment is completed, I tell them, hey, I'm going to send you an email as kind of a recap of our meeting. It's going to have all the notes of everything we talked about. I always, again, I'm taking notes as I'm there. So, when we're walking through the property and I'm saying, hey, you need to declutter this, you're going to need to move this, piece of furniture, you're going to need to, trim that tree back, you're going to need to, repaint that front door. I'm taking notes of all that stuff. That way I can send that in my recap email to them, along with everything else, like what I thought the property was valued at, what I think the list price should be, what we agreed that the listing date would be, right? So that's what I'm doing in that recap email after I'm done. And that seems to suffice for a lot of sellers. They actually love getting that email to recap it. It's in writing. They remember things. And so that's just been my process, and it works out really, really well. So anyways, that is, again, what I bring to my listing appointment. That's what I typically have for a CMA. And I said typically because it's, again, 90% of the time. The other 10% of the time, like if I've got a client that maybe they're just not very tech savvy, they don't get on email very often, anything like that, then I'll typically print stuff out, like just print out what I told you and bring that with me. But then I'll still have my iPad with me, because if I can, still feel like I can show them it and have them understand it, I love to do it that way. But again, if you just get that client that you feel like they really need to have something printed and given to them, they're not going to check emails, they don't want it digitally, then, hey, no harm in printing it out. But that's only about 10% of my appointments. So anyways, the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to jump into these live examples of doing CMAs so you can see it in action. And then I'll follow up with, if you don't have access to RPR, there's a couple alternatives to that Realtor's Property Resource tool that you can, subscribe to. And I'll share those with you so you can go check those out. So, all right, well, let me move right over here. I'm going to move to my other screen here. And let's move this mic around. There we go. All right. So let's take a look at this here. You can see what I've done here is I have pulled up the MLS, right? This is my MLS here. And I've got 4 different examples that I'm going to do. This first one is kind of, your cookie cutter type of home where it's just in a neighborhood. They're all similar square footages, that kind of thing. I'll go over again some more unique situations and examples, but for this first one, I'll show you here. This is a new listing. Obviously, if this was like a listing appointment type of an example, you wouldn't have all this. You would have to go over the tax records and get the square footage from it, and then still do your searches, manually. But for me, what I do is I typically have 2 tabs open. I've got the property on one tab, and I've got just a blank search on another tab, right? So I'll come over here. Here's my blank search. I've got a couple different pre-done filters for me, which, I'm sure there's a million different ways if you can set this up, and there's different MLSs, so they're all going to be different. But for me, I've set up a pre-done one. Just basically, it checks all the different statuses that I need, right? I don't have pending SB. I don't have expireds, canceled withdrawals in mine. I guess you probably could have pending show for backups. I don't really go much into the expireds, canceled withdrawals unless I need to. You can use that to show people, like, if a property was overpriced, why it didn't sell. For me, I try and focus really just mainly on those sold properties. But anyways, I'm going to pull those statuses up I'm going to look at the subdivision that this property is. I'm going to copy that out and pull that up. I'll put that in the subdivision right there. I've got 7, so that's good so far. Let's see here. That property is 1,868 square feet. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1,600 to 2,100. It's about plus or minus 10% square footage. Again, guys, you don't have to be exactly accurate, but just, close. Year built. Let's see, this one is 2004. So I'm going to go 1999 to 2009. Okay, lot sizes in a subdivision. I'm not focused too much on that. Bedrooms and bathrooms, I will put those in. So this is a 3, 2.5. So I'm going to put 3 min, 3 max, 2 full min, 2 full max. I'm not going to mess with the half baths, whether it has it or not. I've got it in as 6 months here. Parking, it's all the same. Stories, I will put in 2 stories, although I'm pretty sure in this neighborhood, they're pretty much all 2 stories. They all have that same kind of look and feel there. But I'll put 2 in there just to go through the motions. And then construction, there is no new construction still in this neighborhood, so that shouldn't change things. Pools, I doubt many of those have a pool in that neighborhood, but either way, I'm still going to put all that stuff in there. So there's all the filters that I've put in. I've got 6 results, which is good for me. Again, that kind of meets my 5 to 10 that I'm looking for. I've got the subject property. I've got one that's active option, meaning it's just went pending. It's under their inspection period. And then I've got 4 solds. So that's pretty good. What I'm going to do next, at least for my MLS, it allows me to do this, is I click down, I say Cma Summary, and then it just basically filters the available properties out from the sold properties, and it gives me a different average for both of the different categories. And so here's my solds. I can see here that, they all usually, well, they mostly have seller concessions. $300 to $500 is not much for seller concessions. That's probably just a home warranty. But I can see here my dollar per square foot solds averages 147 to 146. It looks like here these are all smaller square footage though than my subject property. My subject property is 1,868 square feet. These are all about 1,600. So typically as your square footage goes up, your average price per square foot goes down. So, because these are smaller, that is expected. This one's at 133. And, and then this one, the average is 147 and 146. So tell you what, I take a step back. I kind of jumped into it a little quick. So I jumped right into the MLS first. But again, what I typically do is I would actually pull up Zillow, which here you've got Zillow. I've got the Zestimate, right? I'm just looking at what the Zestimate is. This is real quick. Then I pull up RPR and I see what RPR is saying. RPR says 251. It's only got 4 stars. I like to see 5. But again, 4 is not bad. But that's saying 251, and then that's saying 248. I would go over here back to my tax data for the property, and I can see here the tax values on it for 2018, which is the most recent year it has, is 228. Okay, so now I know the tax value is 228. Zillow is saying the Zestimate's 248. RPR is saying 251. Right, so it gives me kind of some context. But now I can look, right? And I can see, all right, let's just pretend like this house was not priced at $249,900. Let's pretend it's not even out there right now. So all we have to go on are these homes that have sold, right? You've got one that's active option at $245. All right, that's a little bit bigger. It means that it went under contract in 10 days. All of these have sold pretty quickly if you look at that. And so what that would lead me to believe is I don't think the home is going to sell for, in the 140s as far as price per square foot, just because, again, it is bigger than all of these homes that are at 1,600. But I would say, hey, it's probably going to be in like the 130s, something like that, right? And if I looked over here at RPR is, using a lot of data to kind of come up with their numbers. They're saying 251. That would, in my mind, start to get me at least thinking around that 250 number. So from there, I'd pull up my calculator, right? And I would just say, all right, so if it's 250,000 and it's 1,868 square footage, that's putting me at about $133 a foot. I know it says it there, but I'm pretending like that's not there. And I would say, all right, so 133 a foot. I've got a home that's active option that's a little bit bigger at 125 a foot, and I've got some sold comps that are smaller that are, selling at about 240s, in the 240s, and even 140s a square foot. 133 seems pretty plausible. So at that point, I would be like, wow, 250 is probably the number. I think it'll sell at 250, especially seeing how quickly these homes have sold for. It might even go for 255. And realistically at that point, then it just becomes a pricing strategy, and you have the conversation with them that, hey, your property is probably worth somewhere around 250. Somebody could either pay 255, they might pay 245 for it. In my opinion, here's what I think we do. 250 is such a searched number that coming in just below 250, I think we're going to get a ton more views on your property, give us a lot more interest, and may even create a bidding war if we put it at 249.9. And so that would be the conversation I would have with the seller. But again, that's not necessarily CMA, that's pricing strategies. But I think the value of that property, again, is worth anywhere between, say, 245 and 255, just based on what I'm seeing from these comps, right? So that's kind of the first one there. That would be your CMA. When I go to print something out, I would print this out. I would print this out. I would print that out. And then I would print out the taxes. Oops, which I guess I must have closed out on. But anyways, I would print out the taxes for them. The other thing that I would go do is when I actually pull up this property, you can see here, these are all the different statuses it comes up as. It doesn't show that it was ever sold before, so that's not really very helpful. It looks like they just had rented this property for quite some time. But I would use, if it was sold 4 years ago or 3 years ago or something like that, I would pull that up and I'd bring that to the seller with me, and send that in that email, just so they can see, like, okay, hey, it sold 3 years ago for 235. Chances are 3 or 4 years later, it's not going to go up, a ton. It should have gone up, maybe 3-4% per year, but that will help with your story as well when you're creating that CMA. So all of that stuff comes as part of your detective work that we talked about earlier, and just, making sure that, you kind of have all of your information that you need, right? So anyways, so that's one property. I've got another one here. Let me pull up the address. And this next one is going to be kind of like an older remodeled home. So this is like, if you're talking to the seller and they're like, oh yeah, we just did a bunch of, remodels to our house, we're selling it now. Or maybe you're working with an investor and they, routinely flip properties. You're going to want to compare them to other properties that have been remodeled, right? So let's say, this was your subject property. Again, this one's already listed. So, I mean, you can't know, if you're going on a listing appointment, all of this details beforehand necessarily. But like in this case, say you spoke to the seller and they're like, yeah, we just remodeled the home. We put new carpet, we put new wood floors in there. We repainted the whole house. The kitchen is clean. It doesn't have granite, but it's a clean kitchen. These are some of the things that they'll tell you. And you can kind of start to formulate that this is maybe what that property looks like, before you get to it. Well, now here's how you're going to actually create that CMA for it. So you can pull that it's, you'll know that it's, the square footage, you'll know when it was built, you'll know it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. You can know all of this information about it. So in that case, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to pull up, this is the subdivision for it. Let's go back. We're going to clear out this one here. So I'm going to put in this neighborhood. Okay, I'm going to put in square feet. What do we say? This one's 1454. So we're going to go say 1250 and 1650, right? Seems about like it's in the middle. 5 listings found. I know this is probably going to be too few here pretty soon. So, but we're going to keep going through it, and we're going to say it's 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, just like that. Let's see, we still got 5, so that's good. Construction, make sure it's all pre-owned. I'm sure most of them are. Pool, no pool. Okay, stories, they said it's a 1-story, so I'll go 1 or 1.5. Not that I think there'll be too many 1.5s there. All right, and so we still have 5 listings, right, that kind of match that criteria. Now here's where you're gonna have to do a little bit more detective work on this if you've got properties that have been remodeled and not remodeled. So we've got 5 properties in total. Not as many as I'd like to see. Probably one of the first things that I would do in this case is I might go, say like 12 months on here and see if I can get more. Chances are I will. Yep, 7. Okay, so we'll take a look at those. I'm going to come over and say Cma Summary. All right, just like that. Okay, so now I can see my solds, I can see my availables. Here's the subject property here, but let's just pretend like that one's not there. It doesn't exist. We don't know that 127 is the number right now. All we're looking at is we've got one property that's a price change. It's 1521 square feet, 23 days on market. Now you're gonna have to start clicking in, because if you got properties that have the potential to be remodeled or not, that's gonna make a big impact. So I'm gonna click in and look. Let's see. All right, so this one's pretty nice. You can tell it's not remodeled, but they've done some updates to it. So I'd be looking at this and thinking my subject property is probably going to be a little bit nicer if it's a fresh remodel. Like if they, are an investor, chances are, and if they do good work, like maybe you've seen their work before, it's probably going to be nicer maybe than that. If they're a homeowner living in it, probably going to be similar, right? Like this looks like it's a homeowner house and they've just lived in it, and kind of done things as they've lived there, right? And so there's a difference there that you want to be aware of. But this one here is listed at 121 a foot, right? And if we look down at the comps, we've got a range. We've got anywhere from 107 all the way to 136 being on the high side, and the average being about 123, 124. So it would, in my opinion, I would imagine this is probably one that's not been remodeled, and then these have recently been remodeled, right? And we can kind of take a look at the pictures and determine. Here we go. Interesting first picture of the house. Yeah, so you can tell here, needs work, got the popcorn ceilings, dirty, not really updated. Interesting picture choices, but anyways, so that one that would probably need some work. I can tell why that one's probably 107 a foot. Then I come over here and I look at this one. Again, not the best pictures. In fact, it's only got 4 pictures. It looks like they might have put some floors in it, but beyond that, you can't really tell. Go to the next one. Take a look here. Again, not super nice. If I knew this was like a fresh remodel from an investor or something like that, I know that the subject property is gonna be nicer than that one. Go to the next one. Let's take a look at this. Okay, now we're getting kind of nice. This one looks like it, like a kind of a fresh remodel. Nice floors, clean paint, staged nice. All right, good yard. So that's finally my first comp that gives me a little bit of details, and that was 123 a foot. Let's see this last one here. That's 136. Okay, click in. Yep, fresh remodel, staged, granite. Okay, so this is probably the nicest one that you're going to see, and the price tells you that, right? Well, one sold for 136 a foot. You can see the seller concessions here next to it. But if I knew that it was a fresh remodel, like something that's really, really nice, I would say, okay, look, this one's 1454 square feet. This one here is 1439. That's pretty similar. This one listed at 199 and sold for 197 with 5,500 in closing costs. So it basically sold for the low 190s. This home here, truly, if it is a fresh remodel, I don't know the extent, like if it's got as many details, like, if it's got all the, granite, if it has the nice shower like that one had. And so, I'd go in there thinking, okay, the home's probably worth somewhere around 190, might go for 185, it might go for 195. But then I wait until I've seen the property with my eyes to actually make that determination. And I have the conversation with the seller, like, hey, I pull this up on my iPad. I'll show them this one. I'll say, this is the most likely comp that you've got. It's the same square footage just about. It's got, remodeled recently. You can see exactly what they did. It sold in 31 days. Realistically, I think that your property is probably going to sell for somewhere around 190. And then again, it gets now back into pricing strategy. Do you want to list it for under market and get a bunch of offers? Do you want to list it above market and probably get no offers? Do you want to list it at market price and maybe get 1 or 2 offers and just kind of go from there? And most of the time I try and lean them at least on the lower end of going below market, or at least at market, versus of course the alternative, which is listing high. And so anyways, that's kind of how you would look at that. For a property that is a recent remodel. Now, let's say you're going out to a property that, it needs work, right? Like it's a fixer-upper. They've never remodeled it. Maybe they're selling for, an elderly parent who, they're just not going to be in the house anymore. I've been in a few of those types of situations. I've got another property here to show you what you would do on that case. So let's say 7718 Glen Briar. let's say this was going to be your, actually put in Glen. All right, so here's your subject property that you're about to go out to, right? You've never been out to it yet, but you're speaking to the person and they're saying, yeah, you know, it needs, work, probably the foundation, we haven't had it checked. They don't know that it's broke, but they're just, saying, hey, it hasn't been really maintained in a few years. Maybe they say, oh, it's been a rental for the last 4 or 5 years. All those details you can get in that phone call, the better, right? Because now you're going to use that to determine if this is a property that's, very nice, not as nice, or average. That's really the 3 things you're looking for. So if, I'm getting signs that this property is maybe not going to be as nice, right? I'm going to put it on the lower end of the spectrum. And that's all that I'm really looking for. So now I'm going to dive into my comps. And again, let me show you here. What I'll do is I'll go say 7718 Glen Briar. Let's pull that up on Zillow. Glen Briar. And you can find the Zestimate even if the house isn't listed. So I know that mine it's showing that they're already listed because they are. But even if it wasn't, I could see here, okay, the Zestimate saying 145. Let's go over to RPR and look at this one. 7718 Glen Briar. All right, our RPR is saying 146. So Zillow says 145. RPR says 146. Now, especially with like dilapidated homes or completely fixed up homes, like if they're on one end of the spectrum, they're not just the average. That's where, definitely doing your comps are going to be a little bit more useful and helpful. If it's just the average home, especially if it's like a home that's 4 or 5 years old, it's in a subdivision, you know that it doesn't, probably have a lot of updates, and it probably doesn't have a lot of deferred maintenance, you're probably going to get what the average is. That's where, of course, like RPR is going to be way more accurate. But even in this case, this is saying 146. This is saying 145. Let's go in and see what taxes tell us that it is. All right. Taxes tell us that it is valued at 109. Okay. So now here's what I'm thinking. RPR doesn't know if the property has foundation issues, if the property is dilapidated. Neither does Zillow or, really the tax records. And so what, this value could be, this 146, is probably the value if it's in good shape, right? Like average condition. It might not mean that it's completely remodeled, but it also doesn't probably have foundation issues, which I can tell just looking at these pictures that it does. Plus, I even saw in the MLS here, in additional information, they've shared some foundation estimates and stuff. So if you know that it's got something that's going to need work, you're obviously going to have to account for that in your CMA. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do my comp analysis of this property. So let me come in here. I'm going to go over and pull up a new CMA search. I'm going to pull up this subdivision. There we go. The Glen. I'm going to look at, so 31 listings. It's a 3.2, 1,500 square feet. Okay, so square foot, I'll go 1,300 to 1,700. Year built is 1976. I'm going to go to 1970, 1982. Oops. There we go. All right, lot size, it's regular subdivision. Not going to worry about that. 3322. Okay, number of stories, it's a 1 story compared to 1s and 1.5. I'm not even going to worry about garage. I know that all the homes in that area. Well, actually, here's where a garage could be important. Yeah, like this one here doesn't even have a garage. So again, you do have to be careful because sometimes, like on this one here, you want to just, you can put converted garage if that's an option, but a lot of times that may actually put 0 results or 1, right? So you're not going to get very many. I'll just take that off and I'll use that as kind of something that I think about, I factor in while I'm thinking about properties. So if it's like something that's got a 2-car garage, and it's the same square footage, well then, that's a lot different than a home that has no garage because they converted it to add to the square footage. So, you might factor in an extra 10, 15, 20 grand depending on garage versus no garage. But it's something that you'll have to do kind of manually in your head. So, okay, so I've got just those filters in. You can already tell here that it's only giving me 2. That's definitely not enough. The other thing is sometimes the subdivision, Yeah, depending on if it's legal or common, might give you a little bit different results there. What I'll do in this case is I'll go in here to select boundaries. I'm going to center it on my address, Glen Briar, just like that. Come in here. I can see my property. So you could do a radius search, but I actually do these polygon searches and do it like that. Just kind of pull it down there. Get as many as I can in there. The little polygon search. It's only found one now, so it's even getting me less. So I'm going to go back. I'm just going to say the Glen, right? And then I'm going to have to open up maybe the month sold. Let's pull 12 months and see. All right, only 3, so not very many. Let's go ahead and take the stories off. 5. All right, we can take off year built, because if they're all in the Glen, they're all going to be about the same year built most likely. Yeah, so it didn't change much. Still got 3 2s, still got the square footage. I really don't want to touch the square footage on this. Let's just go ahead and see what we get with our 5. Okay, let's see. Quick summary. Okay, so here's the big difference, right? You got dilapidated versus possibly nice, maybe average, right? So you got low, middle, high, and we can see here that, you know, on the low end of things, you know, 1,500 square feet, dilapidated, which I assume these ones are. We'll click in and just make sure. Yeah, here's like a 2-story that sure is going to have some issues. Yeah, it's definitely needing some major work, right? And this one doesn't even look like it is a single family. In fact, that one is townhome. So again, that's one of the other factors. If you start to see that, you come up here and put in the type, single family detached. And now I've only got 3. I'm back to the drawing board, right? So now what I can do, I want to stick to the Glen. I don't want to mess with that, but let's see here. Let's see if I go 1250 to 1750, if that opens up any more. 6, perfect, okay. So let's search that. All right, let's pull all these up. So again, we don't know that this is, let's pretend like this isn't listed. This is going to be our subject property that we're trying to determine the value for. So now what we see here is there's a lot of properties that are sold between 136 and 152. Let's start clicking in and see if any of them are as rough as potentially our home is going to be. So if we click into this, this does not look rough one bit, right? Like this one looks completely remodeled, which would lead me to believe that there's no property that's sold, at least in the last 12 months that we put in here, that is as rough as that one. So I need to get some kind of a comp. I'm going to go back 24 months and see. Now we get 16. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. Cma Summary. All right, so now we're definitely getting some. I don't even know what this house is, but that is pretty crazy. $18 a square foot. Woo, that is rough. So they put that as single family, even though that's not. But anyways, here we go. We can look. All right, so we can see on the low end, we've got some that are in the 50, 57, 47, 73, 81, 105. So we can start looking in here. I'd probably, if I know that the house is still standing and it's, you know, maybe good, but it just needs some foundation work or something, well, then it's probably, in my opinion, going to be somewhere in the middle there. It's not going to be super low end, but let me start on this one with 8339 Glenmont and kind of pull it up. There's a bank foreclosure. Again, not sure if it has any foundation issues or not in that one, just based on the pictures. It does say cash offers only, which could mean that it has some foundation issues. But let's take a look at another one, 7314 Glen Haven. Let's take a look at this one. You also can read some of what they write, right? Because sometimes they'll say like needs foundation work, that type of stuff. Otherwise, I'm looking in here to see, is it remodeled, is it not? Does it have cracks in all the drywall? Any of that kind of stuff. It doesn't look like it. This one just looks like it's not a remodeled house, but it's also not, you know, terrible. So it's kind of making me think, all right, so $70 to $80 is maybe the, you know, per foot is the going rate for a home that is average to maybe low end. 105, 112 a foot is kind of the, you know, going rate for maybe something that's a bit nicer. Like if we come in here, let's look at this one for 109. Yeah, I mean, you can already tell just from the photos, you know, green grass, nice home, remodeled. All right, so then what we start to think about is you almost have to put your investor hat on, right? Like if I know this needs foundation work, and if my end game is that this house is worth 110 a foot, right? And this house is say 1,500 feet, Let's look at that. 1,500 times 110 a foot. I know my max value on that is maybe 165, and that might be even stretching it a little bit, just because that 110 is on a smaller house. That's 1,287 feet and 1,300 feet, which is smaller than our subject property. Plus, ours doesn't have a garage, which I would imagine these ones do. They probably didn't convert the garage there. Oh, this one did. So that's actually 13 with a converted garage. This one's 15. But either way, 165 is probably the very high end. So let's just say it's worth 155 or even 150, somewhere in that 150 to 160 range. Well, if I know that it's got foundation work, and then when you do foundation work, you're gonna have to repaint, you're gonna probably have to do some new floors, all that kind of stuff on a 1,500 square foot house, it's probably gonna be about a $30,000 to maybe $35,000 remodel on it, and that investor is gonna want to profit some at the end of the day. And so, realistically, I'm gonna think this property is probably worth anywhere from 100 to maybe 115 on the high end of it all. And so that's where my mind's gonna go. And then what I would do is if I said 115,000, I'll divide it by the square footage, 1518, puts me at $75 a foot, right? Of course, I already know that's what they're listed at, but then I'd come down, I'd look at my story again, right? It's probably not on the super low end, like if I clicked on this one on Glen Pass, what does this one look like? Okay, you can tell like this one, I don't even think it's like connected to another house. It's got some weird stuff going on, super small, it doesn't even look like a single family house. And if I know that mine's single family, which I might even get on like Google Street View, right, to try and see what it looks like from the front, I know it's going to go for more than 50. It's not going to go for 100. 75 seems right. So when I go in there, I'm kind of in my mind thinking, it's probably 100,000 to 115, maybe on the high end, if all it needs is foundation work. If it's completely like the roof is shot, AC's bad, all this kind of stuff, you start adding all that up while you're there. If you haven't already uncovered that while you're speaking to the person. So anyways, again, it's a fluid situation. I come in, I do as much analysis as I can up front into what I think that property is worth before I've seen it. And then when I'm there, I've already done all the work up front. So now I'm just kind of, going back from what I remember and going through these numbers with the people. Again, that's why I bring my iPad so I can show all of these things as I'm going on it. So anyways, let me make sure, we're quick check on time. We're doing good. I got one last property I'm going to show you here, and this is going to be the one out kind of in the country. So we'll do 434 Oak Haven. Oak Haven, there we go, Spring Branch. All right, and so it's on, I think it's on 3 acres, something like that. I looked at it. Here we go, 3.01 acres. So first thing again, I'm going to go 434 Oak Haven on Zillow. Oak Haven, Spring Branch, there we go. I'm going to go and do the same thing on RPR, 434 Oak Haven. There we go. All right, so this is Zestimate's telling me 828. RPR is telling me 832, 5-star accuracy. This is very uncommon, in my opinion, to see something out in the country where there's a lot of differentiating factors to have 5 stars and to have it be, pretty close to accurate potentially. Usually I see them $100,000 one way or the other sometimes. I mean, it can be pretty wide ranging, especially with acreage homes like this. But then, of course, the next part is we're going to pull up our MLS analysis here. And we're going to go search. All right. And then this one is in Mystic Shores. Like that. 57. That's probably a good sign. We're going to have some good comps. 3,500 feet. Let's see here. There we go, 3,000 to 4,000. Again, I mean, that's more than 10%, but it's, again, if it's 35, that's 350, so it's not far off. Acreage, I know that it's on 3 acres. I'm gonna go 2 to 5 acres. Bedrooms, it's a 3, 2. Let's see, we've only got 4. So again, that's filtered it down quite a bit, because I guess imagine the 3,500 feet with only 3 bedrooms is probably gonna limit it. And also I know in that neighborhood, that 3 acres is pretty uncommon too. That's pretty a lot of land. That'd be the other thing too, is if I know it's in a subdivision, it's just got a bigger lot in the subdivision, I might take off the acreage. And, you know, if I'm comparing it to, say, a 1 acre house and this one's got 3 acres, I'll see what that 1 acre house sold for, and then just add back some of that value if it was 3 acres. All right, so number of stories, it is a 1 story, which I'll compare to, I'll allow 1 and 1.5 in it. I just don't want 2 stories. Oops. There we go. It's not new construction. It's pre-owned, I believe. Let me make sure. Yeah, this one is pre-owned. It's got a 3-car garage, looks like, or 2-car, let's see. 2-car garage, okay. Good to know, because especially in these more expensive properties, that can get to be pretty important, right? A lot of people may want a 3-car. Now we've only got 1 listing, so we've definitely kind of filtered it out probably too much in my opinion. We can try and widen the range to 24 months just to see if we get any more back, but we don't. It's really more of just our filters. So when you have a situation like that, again, where your filters make it so custom and unique, you're gonna have to add back some of these. So let's just take 1 and 1.5 off. Let's go ahead and let's bring this down to 12 months. Let's take off the garage requirement. If it's a 3, then we'll just add that back in. And we'll even take off the acreage there. That adds a little bit more. All right, so now we're getting a few more. I think still the 3 to 4 bedroom is kind of a big difference here. Let's go 2 and 3. Yeah, see, that's the bathrooms. A lot of people want probably 3 full bathrooms potentially. And so we'll pull all those up and we'll take a look here. See what they look like. We just might have to do a little bit more math in our head here for this one. But you can see here that the most expensive one went for $715, least expensive $470. You know, this subject property, we don't know yet what it should be listed at. I know what they listed it at. Obviously, you can tell here, you know, that they listed it at $849, $239 a foot. In my opinion, I can tell you already that's pretty high. You know, just looking at the comps, the highest is $715. Let's take a look and see what this property looked like. So, very nice house. Right, all the nice features. It even has a swimming pool, which I don't know. Let's see, did this one have a pool? This one here. And sorry guys, just for the sake of time, I'm trying to do it a little bit quicker, so that's why I'm leaving off some of these filters that if I had more time, I'd probably be putting in there. But I don't. Oh, I do see a pool. Okay, so it does have a pool. It tells you if you have a pool here. Yep, in-ground pool. So, you know, you could go back, let's refine criteria. Let's add a pool, say yes. That'll filter down some of those. So we got 4 now that are accurate, but even still, these 4 here, only 1 has sold. The rest are still available. I'm gonna go back and maybe pull 24 months. And you can see why this becomes kind of like it's almost like an art form, right? You just, you know, you get used to kind of doing these things back and forth. So you go back a couple of years, and luckily it tells you here the close date, so you can know if it is an older comp to maybe back in a little bit of the extra price. But it's still, you know, in the last 24 months, nothing has sold for more than $715, even with a pool out in that neighborhood. And this one here was listed for 73 days. List price was $748, sold for $715. $4,500 in closing costs. I would probably venture to say, and that was 3,700 feet. Let me see here how many bedrooms and bathrooms. 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. So same, you know, that one's a 3, 2.5. This one's on 4 acres, so actually more acreage even than the subject property. And so realistically, I would be probably telling that seller, hey, you know, we would be lucky if we can get somewhere around 200 a foot. But realistically, like this one here just sold a few months ago, right? And it sold for $191 a foot. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, you know, 191 times 3544, 676,904 is the actual price at $191 a foot. You know, a lot can change now, you know, going out to the property and taking a look at it and seeing what it has. It looks like this one, I mean, it's got some pretty cool stuff. Like if this was just a house, then that would be the price. This one though, it's got like a guest house, it looks like, off the side here. And I don't know, you know, again, this is where having that phone conversation with them is important. Also going out and seeing the property is important. But it says here 4,300 square feet of living space. So that's probably the thing we're not accounting for, because the 3,500 is just the main house. The other 800 square feet is this extra guest house, which, that's adding on a lot of value. Now they're putting it as far as value, if, let's just say that, again, let's just say it didn't have that guest home and it was worth 191 a foot times 3,500, it'd be worth six in the 660s. So, in this case, it looks like they're valuing that extra guest house at 200 grand, which is pretty high. And that's probably the reason why it's been on the market for 150 days. I would say, realistically, that extra 800 square feet of guest space, even if you gave it a value of over $100 a foot, let's say 120 a foot, is 100 grand, maybe 120. So if you're lucky, this is probably a 775 type of property, 785, something like that. I would want to be listing that thing under 800,000. I'd want to list it for about 799, 900 to really get some interest. But it's, again, just depends on pricing strategy, what the goals are of the seller, if they need to sell quick, if they don't. Even if they don't want to sell quick, I always tell people, hey, the longer it stays on the market, the lower price you're going to end up getting for it, because people start to wonder, hey, why is it sitting? We've talked about that on this call before. But anyways, that is just how I would look at that value. If somebody were buying the property, I would probably tell them, hey, I wouldn't want to spend over 800 on it. I might even make our offer for 750, just see where it goes. But anyways, hopefully that gives you guys some insight into the CMA process and how I go about looking at CMAs. As far as the last thing I was going to share with you is some alternatives to RPR. Oh, let me get my mic here. Just some alternatives to RPR. And what I found, I like Cloud CMA. It's actually a really cool program that gives you a good example presentation, a listing presentation on your iPad that you can bring with you if you still want to go kind of that route of having a listing presentation. Cloud CMA will take the property and actually build out the CMA for you, which you can manipulate. You can change it if it's not completely accurate, but then putting it into a listing presentation format for you, which is really, really cool and unique. I think it runs about $35 per month for Cloud CMA. But it's probably the first one that I would try if I didn't already have RPR and if I didn't already have the process that I'm doing. The other one is called House Canary. This one's more expensive. This one's like $54 per month, and you only get 10 CMAs per month with that. And then the last one is called Toolkit CMA, and that one's about $190 annually. So that's probably the cheapest route if you're going to do something annually. And they all, for the most part, work with most MLSs. I think Toolkit CMA works with a few more MLSs than the other two, but even Cloud CMA, I think, works with like 300 to 400 MLSs. So there's a good chance that your MLS is a part of it. But those are some alternatives to RPR if you don't want to use RPR, or if you just want to have that listing presentation type of format along with your CMA. So that being said, guys, I know this was a long one. I hope that it was valuable for you. And I didn't get to get into any of the questions right now, but I promise you, if you leave a question or a comment or just need some clarification, put it in the comments below, whether you're watching this live or watching this after the fact. And I'll be happy to respond to those comments, get you the answers that you're looking for. And hopefully this will help get you a little bit stronger, more confident with your valuation method for clients. So anyways, guys, make it a great week. I'll see you guys on the call next week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.